Yes, he
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Donnybrook. Hope you're able to shovel out of this winter mess. And thank you very much for being our guest. Tell you what, we're going to check in with Greg Storr, originally from St. Louis. Now he covers the Supreme Court for Bloomberg News, and he'll join us on the second half, and Ray and I will pepper Mr. Storr with some questions. So don't miss that one. Let's meet our almost frozen roundtable, starting with the Snow Queen herself, Wendy Wiese from the Big 550 KTRS, Old Man Winter, Bill McClellan from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Ray Hartmann. He's been shoveling every Thursday night for 36 years here on the 9 Network. He's also with the RFT, KTRS, and rawstory.com. And future bobsled competitor, Mr. Alvin Reid from the St. Louis American. Well, Bill McClellan, we're going to kick things off with you. It was a weird week, I think, in Jefferson City when the health director nominee for state government was torpedoed by Senate Republicans, even though he, Don Kauroff, was proposed by a Republican governor, Mike Parson. Parson then said in a release the next day, hey, Kauroff was a great guy. He was guided by Christian values. Some people said, hey, this is Missouri and it's 2022. We don't say that a fella is guided by Christian values. What do you think?
Hey, of all the things I can get offended by in Jeff City, somebody's saying that some other person is guided by Christian values isn't one of the things I'd be offended by. I mean, Christian values means is supposed to mean a certain kind of thing. I mean, being charitable, being honest. It doesn't bother me at all. I mean, I thought it was very interesting that guy got torpedoed by the very mob that Mike Parson has encouraged all these months and years, and now they've turned on him. That was very interesting. But to say that a man has Christian values, you know, you could say that about me. I wouldn't be offended.
I was just going to say, Bill, I'm guided by Christian values too. Now, I run off the road often, but
yeah.
But that really, that didn't offend me. And right along the same path as you said, the story here is that what happened to that gentleman it's not humorous. It's not anything other than scary. I mean, this is just flat out like we're starting to get into like some
60s movies, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's almost like Children of the Corn.
Right.
Who knew that Governor Parson would look like Ted Kennedy? I mean, you know, compared to the conservative crowd that derailed his choice. And as far as being guided by Christian values or principles or what have you, I would hope that today, as you said, Charlie, in 2022, we have Muslim members of Congress. We have Muslims, you know, serving at the state levels all around the country. I would hope that if they said that I am guided by my Muslim principles, that there wouldn't be a cacophony of blowback over it.
There would be, Wendy.
There would be. And let me just say, I'll disagree. I'm Jewish. I don't speak for anybody else who's Jewish. I am not going to use the word offended because I'm not offended by it, but I don't like it. And quite frankly, J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, is Jewish. If he referred to his Jewish values, there would be many people uneasy with it. Not on this panel, but I will tell you, it against the backdrop. And of course, I agree with all of you about this. The poor guy, Karoff, whatever his name is. That's just sort of the Frankenstein monster don't look so good when he gets up off the table. And they created this monster and they're going to live with it. But as far as the Christian thing,
I think Ray's right. I honestly, I think Ray's right. And by the way, Ray, you're going to talk about this with Rabbi Susan Talvey tonight on your show on 550. I know, guys, it's us versus them. If it was a Jewish governor saying he had wonderful Christian values, then that would be inclusive and magnanimous. But for a Christian to say, hey, our guy has our Christian values, I don't like that. I think it makes some people feel like they're on the outside.
I do think that there are members of the media. I think there are members. I mean, there are just citizens who would applaud the same situation in reverse if we were talking about Islam.
No, I don't. Here's the deal. There's a lot of people right now. We're welcoming, hopefully going to welcome Afghan Muslims, many of them.
Exactly,
And
Ray.
they will not, I will tell you, if I was coming to this country and I heard the governor as a Muslim talk about Christian values, I don't think I would feel comfortable. We have great communities of Buddhists, Hindus,
Right.
but the point is, it's great for you to say, well, it's all nice. They are not, I will tell you, and not to mention atheists and agnostics do not want to hear this talk.
I think you were holding what you're holding against the governor in this case is his politics and what other people have to say about using the term Christian values. Because if a black minister in the middle of a sermon speaking about civil rights said like Christian values should guide us to a place where we don't have these stupid voting laws and we take better care of minority people, nobody would have any problem with that.
It's a completely different situation in the
No,
city.
it's not.
It's not, right?
Why would it be
A minister in a sermon, I would hope they would use
But
Christian.
Ray, Christian values in this country is like a cliche. And to be, and you say you're not offended by it, you act very offended by
I'm
it.
not offended by it.
I think Ray, let me come to Ray's defense.
Offended implies this like kind of cancel culture or something. I just don't think it's right. And I will tell you, in another, until recently,
I will say, okay, great points made by everyone, but maybe as an exit, I just think we've come to a weird area right now where the health directors are always controversial, whether it's in the city of St. Louis County, or now at the state level. Where are we in this world? Okay, Wendy Wiese, Josh Hawley, the junior senator from the once great state of Missouri, we'll put it that way. So I'm giving Missouri a chance. It could reform itself at some point. But Mr. Hawley is at odds with the White House over its foreign policy. Troops will be sent to Ukraine, or at least just outside of it. And at the same time, the president hasn't said, President Joe Biden, that the United States will definitely not ask Ukraine to join NATO. And Hawley is afraid if Ukraine is in NATO, we'll end up defending it if Russia invades. And so he says our resources should be spent elsewhere, like in the Pacific, more concerned with China. I think Hawley makes a good point. What do you think?
As hard as this is to believe, and I agree with you and Senator Hawley, Charlie, because I was reading an opinion piece in the Washington Post, and while it seems like it's pretty simple to understand freedom, yay, the devil's in the details. And that after the 2004 Orange Revolution in Ukraine, this was something that ushered in a pro-Western president. So if you have somebody who is basically, I mean, he's an autocrat, he's a dictator, he's a strong, whatever you want to call him, he is always going to be very aggressive. He is now very chummy. I mean, he and China are, they are entwined at this moment. And if Ukraine does become a member of NATO, that would be tantamount to a declaration of war, according to Senator Hawley.
I disagree completely. I'm sorry. But first of all, I never thought I'd see the day when any Republican would be pro-Russia and Vladimir.
I don't think it's pro-Russia.
Oh, it is. It most definitely is. Listen to Tucker Carlson, one of his mentors.
I don't listen to Tucker Carlson.
Okay. Well, I'm telling you, there's the extreme right just happens to be pro-Putin in this case. And I think it's an amoral and immoral position. If we can't stand, I don't have a position on whether Ukraine should join NATO, but if we can't stand for a democratic ally against a murderous dictator, KGB raised in Vladimir Putin.
Sounds like Vietnam all over again, right?
It sounds like
all you have to do is think of Europe in the 30s. And when Hitler said, I want, what was it, the Sudetenland, part of Czechoslovakia, and Neville Chamberlain, peace in our time. And we thought that by appeasing Hitler, or Chamberlain thought by appeasing Hitler, we avoid war. And just the opposite happened. And I don't think you can let Vladimir Putin dictate what our policy is. I mean, I think it's crazy.
I understand what you're saying. I think we're going to need something of a velvet hammer with this guy. And I don't think.
I agree.
I don't think that things are as simple as they appear to be. And I don't think that this is like Chamberlain and Hitler and appeasement. I'm
right.
sorry.
To Bill's point, the Soviet tanks rolled into Hungary in 1954. We didn't do anything. The Soviet tanks rolled into Czechoslovakia in 1968. We stood by. We just got out of a 20-year quagmire in Afghanistan. I mean, aren't we learning anything?
Well,
yeah, I've learned that somebody still has the hand up Josh Hawley's sock puppet brain and is going like this, and that's all the thought that you really need to give.
Thank you. And, he should be addressed as insurrectionist, Josh Hawley.
and those other countries you're talking about, Charlie, they were communist. They were part of the Soviet Union empire, and Ukraine is an independent country. And I don't think that Putin should be able to say, I'm going to go in there and you better back off. And if us go, well, of course we'll back off. I
think about this for a moment, guys. Since the Cold War ended, we invited 14 countries to enter NATO, right? Imagine if Russia were doing that in Central America, forming some sort of military alliance in our backyard.
I mean, we haven't generally operated on that sort of moral equivalency, if you will. Plus, keep in mind, we're not talking about a unilateral action against Russia by the United States of America. We're talking about working with our NATO allies with whom we are committed in Europe collectively. And I can't imagine a Republican politician being against a strong NATO, standing together against this threat.
Well, let's move on, Alvin Reid, to something a little more local. Turns out more kids escaped from local detention facilities in the last week. And so now that brings to 19 the number of teens who have escaped from either the Enright Road detention facility or the Hogan Street facility in our area. Both are operated by the state, one by the state court, 22nd Judicial, the other by the state government, I think Department of Youth Services. 19 kids escaping detention, and some of them were in there on homicide charges. So my question is, are we just living in an age of incompetence, or is this something that's been going on for a long time and we never really noticed?
I would say incompetence, and then also whatever your structural physical being of these centers are. I just think that it's a matter of either a door not working or a door not being locked. I don't think people are masterminding escapes and making keys out of soap bars and things like that, or throwing sheets over the side of the wall. I think they're just walking out, and I don't know that because they don't release too many details. But I would just like to go back and have every last one of them explained how it happened. And I think every one of them probably could have been stopped.
Well, they have 30 kids at least at the Hogan Street Center. So how about we reduce the number of kids? How about we put 15 kids? I mean, maybe if we because I know we probably don't have the staff accessible members of staff to take care of it. But let's reduce the number and see if that helps. But 30 kids who are looking to get out, if you have maybe one supervisor or two supervisors, I mean, I think all five of us would be able to get out of a place like that without a lot of.
But how would
security.
we get out? I mean,
As you
how,
said, it might be as simple as just walking out
Okay.
the door or an
Right.
open window.
Well, no,
But-
they attacked a guard with a shank. In another case, they threw bleach in a guard's face and overpowered him and took the keys and then got keys to a car in the parking lot. And so it happens. You're probably right, Wendy. They're understaffed, maybe poorly trained, maybe the facilities are old.
All
But
of the above, probably.
this story combined with the locks not working at the jail for the adults doesn't
Yeah.
give me much comfort, I must say.
I don't think, I hate to be arguing with Wendy all night, but I don't think you could just arbitrarily say, let's have fewer people, these young people detained, if in fact they are.
We have a
murderers,
problem with
dangerous.
30.
If they,
Okay,
well,
if
no,
we-
but I'm saying if there's really a problem, Alvin referred to systemic, and I think it's smart to do so. We need to think about, and I know this is going to sound like I'm political. If you live in a state that continually underfunds all of its services, including corrections, including this kind of services, this is what you get. And the answer probably is, instead of saying, well, we're understaffed, and as Alvin points out, we probably got outdated buildings, maybe we ought to put some of the resources that are presumably flowing around Jeff City into not being underfunded. And not
there's another thought too. I don't know the historical context of this, but it might be that kids have always escaped. I mean, I looked up once about James Earl Ray when he escaped from the state prison in Jefferson City, and we had just a little bitty story on the inside about a St. Louis man escaping from prison. Whereas now, if somebody escapes from prison or jail, it's a huge deal. So maybe things aren't a whole lot worse with juveniles than they ever been. I'm not
That's
sure.
a good point, Bill. In terms of the budget crunch, the lack of police officers, the murder rate, it might just be sort of a perfect storm. Maybe it always has been like this. You just
Hey,
don't know.
let me ask you, Alvin, about a couple of stories here. One, Congresswoman Cori Bush insists their car was hit by gunfire. She hasn't released photos of the car. She's fine, but she didn't file a police report to the best of our knowledge. So there's that. Fox News is writing that she and other members of the so-called squad have spent about $200,000, $300,000 on private security, while some of them, including Representative Bush, have called to defund the police. And then at home, Harris Stowe Community College was the target of a bomb threat, and it's one of, I think, 17 historically Black colleges and universities in the nation to receive such threats recently. Well, what do you make of all these stories?
Well, I think, you can't tie like the bomb threat in with the Cori Bush kind, but that's kind of exactly what I'm going to do. If I was Cori Bush, a member of the so-called squad, a congressperson, or I worked in the Senate, whatever my security was, and I'd been there a while, let's say 8 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it was, it might be double now, because I think people are dangerous now. I think a lot more people are a lot more dangerous and would bring harm to me or anyone of differing political philosophy. It's terrible to say that, but my opinion on that has changed. 10 years ago, I would have said, I don't know they need to be spending really all that much on security. And now I don't have a problem with it, because I think there are people out there that are driven, not, the ones that are doing the talking in Washington, D.C. and like in the state capitol. They're not going to do anything except run their mouths, but they're whipping people into a fervor that's dangerous. So I've got no problem with that. Harris Stowe, the 17 colleges, or they were one of 17 colleges. It's shameful and it's a lot of words, but also it's a reality. And every one of those colleges better make sure that they check in every closet, under every bed, and shut down. Because like in years in the past, okay, you made a big deal of threatening these schools on Black History Month. You made your point. But no, I think it's frightening, because one could be real.
Well, Alvin, I agree about people being more dangerous now and people being egged on to do terrible things. But the problem with Cori Bush is not that she has hired more security. It's that at the same time she's hiring more security, she's talking about defunding the police for the rest of the people. And that's the problem. I mean, because the streets are dangerous too. And I don't think that Cori Bush seems to realize that.
I disagree. I think that Cori Bush, first of all, I disagree with Cori Bush about any use of defunding the police. I have since the beginning. But I think that I don't begrudge any member of Congress, however far right they are, however far left they are, irrespective of their views on any issue. At this point, I don't think there is such a thing as spending too much money on security.
No, I'm not saying there is.
Well, but I'm just saying that it's really irrelevant to me whether she thinks that. And keep in mind, the people that, again, I hate that phrase, defunding the police. I don't use it, but those folks are people who want to spend more on prevention and more for mental health services. You can disagree with them, but they're not advocating that there not be.
I think Cori Bush does advocate.
Well, okay, but it's irrelevant to her security needs, just like whatever crazy stuff Lauren Boebert says or Marjorie Taylor Greene that may create more security needs. That too is irrelevant. They still have to be protected.
Yeah,
I agree with what Alvin was saying though about the mental health crisis. When you every single day there seems to be another story about suicidal ideation and the number of people who need access, who are not diagnosed, who need to be treated. And if you add, as you said, somebody stoking the flames, then you really could have a tragedy, another tragedy like January 6th.
I think Bill makes sense. I mean, it's not like Congresswoman Bush is saying, hey, I'm hiring counselors and social workers to surround me, as she and others have suggested when it comes to crime in the streets. She's hiring security guards, which is what a lot of people who want more police want. Security guards.
So if she wanted more funding for police, it's okay to meet her security needs.
Yeah.
You can't, Ray. You don't see a contradiction?
No, I don't. I mean,
I don't. No, I really don't. I honestly, I don't. I mean, and Ray explained it beautifully, like I was trying to, when he said, regardless, you're far right, you're far left. And the things you say may add to the threat to you. That does not matter whatsoever.
Okay, let's move on to bike lanes. A proposal, actually a plan released this week, has suggested, Ray, that there should be a bike lane on Tucker going down to Shoto, one from Compton crossing 6440, and another one on South Broadway. And the money, of course, is federal dollars for local bike lanes. Does that remind you a little bit of the Loop Trolley, where it was so inviting because, after all, we didn't have to pay for it? Take us back down memory lane. How well that work out, Ray?
Maybe we should take a bike ride down memory lane. Why is that? Is that even controversial? I mean,
we're $30 trillion in debt right now. You probably noticed that.
Excuse me. The idea that the federal government would fund programs around the country. Now, I know you think we should unilaterally not participate, which encourage and make the community safer and more, I guess, mobile, whatever you want to call it, and more accessible for people who ride bikes, but because we should put it all into automobiles. I think it's a very good priority for the federal government to invest in communities across the country. I think it can only be good for St. Louis, and I can't even imagine it be controversial.
I agree with Ray. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. We've got
make a habit of it.
We have the brick line coming in. I think we have to, as much as the old fuddy-duddies on the panel, of which I'm proud to count myself among you, we have to try to be more like the Brooklyns, the New Yorks, the San Diegos, the Seattles, the Chicagos, and not less like those metropolitan areas where young people actually do, they do sort of turn to cyclists or cycling as a way of transportation, as their main form of transportation. And apparently, if you have these dedicated bike paths, you have a lot fewer fatalities. You have a greater or a decreased risk of injuries. I think it's a win-win unless the bike path goes from Del Mar to the History Museum, Charlie. If that's the case, I agree with you.
I like the bike paths too, and I'm not here to argue that we should have for old people walkers lanes. I agree with you guys. If we want to have young people here, and everybody thinks we should, bike lanes make a lot of sense. And if the feds are going to pay for them,
and this would be low impact compared to digging up the street and putting in trolley car tracks and all that. I mean, I don't know what all it entails.
Oh, they're digging up Tucker. They're going to put, and actually makes sense. I think, Alvin, they're going to reduce it from like 8 lanes to 4, put a median in the middle, and all that's fine. But we already have the 0.1% sales tax that goes toward, the trails, the greenway. So we already have that locally. But, $1 million here, $1 million there, before you know it, you are $30 trillion in debt. And these are the same arguments we used for the loop trolley. It was so important. And if we don't spend the money, it'll go elsewhere. And
Charlie, is there anything besides police that you would favor federal money for?
Well, that's a funny thing you mention it, because 2 kids were shot right where that photo of the bike trail is on Tucker, which is next to my office. 2 kids, a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, were shot on that corner on Monday night, according to KMOV. So I
know you favor more.
I think if we think that
any other purpose than that, of course we want more police. The point is, is there any, what purpose, what would you support?
Well, I think it should be supported locally. If you want a bike trail, that's not a federal priority.
But you just answered your own question. We don't have the money to put police on Tucker. So how in the world are we going to fund bike paths?
I think we do have money. We got the Super Bowl money or the NFL money, and we got $550 million from the feds. That's the one thing we do have, and the state has a $7 billion surplus. That's the one thing we do have.
Money around here.
That is true. I'm sure Governor Parsons would help us out with this if we
Yeah, that's all going to rural Missouri, Chuck. There was Dave Drebes had a very interesting story in the Business Journal about all of the money most of the money going to rural Missouri under Mike Parsons. So,
are they getting bike paths?
Hey,
that's an interesting point. I think they're going broad.
We're out of time.
He's for Christian.
Thank you, Bill, Alvin, Ray, don't go away. Wendy, thank you so much. Ray and I are going to be talking to Greg Storr, who is an attorney, and he covers the Supreme Court for Bloomberg News. We'll talk about that vacancy announced or created by the announcement of Stephen Breyer's retirement. That and more on Next Up.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.